This is the popular, sacred, and secular monophony of the 12th to the 14th century. What does that mean? That means all the songs that they sang from 12th to the 14th century that is not complicated, doesn't have a lot of parts. You have one melody, you have a whole bunch of lyrics, but the melody itself is not complicated. You don't have to worry about different parts coming in. Everybody's singing the same thing. How this started in the church, they were doing that. And at the time that monophony was getting popular with the people, not in the church, not in the sacred, very important places, but just people wanting to perform, the nobles in the courts. You would have traveling musicians. This was what the people would hear. Which, as a member of the SCA, as somebody who considers myself a modern troubadour, this is the kind of music that speaks most to me. Because this wasn't anything fancy. This is what you would hear, just around. So, early monophonic music that wasn't from the church started in around the 6th century up through the 9th century. It wasn't really established. There were interests in the Latin classics, and that's when you started getting the idea of entertainment that wasn't just church-based. You had an interest in the ancient classics, in Greek classics, and we have records of what they wrote down, what that music sounded like, but it's so hard to read. It assumes a knowledge of the music that we don't have anymore. A lot of early music was based off of, I know you already know how this goes, so this is just like a quick reminder in case you forget something real fast. It was meant to be a little cheat sheet, but since we don't have that background information of, everybody knows that when you see this thing here, it means that, we don't. So the earliest music that we have, similarly to in the church, is really hard to read. It's really hard to decipher. However, then come the rock stars of the 12th century, the troubadours, who came out of William IX of Aquitaine is credited as the first one because he went off on his crusade and he brought the music back with him. Was he the first one? Maybe not. But he was certainly the most famous of the first ones, and we have his name. We have his songs that he wrote, or he said he wrote. That happened a lot, especially in an early period where you would have people with money hired musicians. And so because it was my money that hired the musicians, therefore it is now my song. And my name goes on it, and then I print it because I'm the one who has the scribes, and I'm the one who writes the books, so therefore it's my song. So William IX was known as a great lover and a bit of a Don Juan. He went from courts to courts seducing the women, and they're so beautiful, and then he would go somewhere else. And that's part of where you get this modern interpretation of the troubadours, is these who sing of love, and love that cannot be reached, and love that is just so far away, and this longing and this pain and this beauty. This is where all that is happening, because that is becoming very in fashion in all of the courts. So then you have the troubadours, which were in southern France. And as this is growing more popular, you have motion coming up through southern France, and then you also have little pockets where similar things are kind of happening at the same time, because all of the wheels are starting to turn. We are no longer fighting each other quite as badly right now. And so we have some time to focus on the more beautiful things. And so you have the troubadours, when they come up to northern France, they speak the langue d'oil, as opposed to the Languedoc, which is the language of the troubadours. And up there they are called the trouvères. And in what we now think of as Germany were the Minnesangers. And and up in the British Isles, you had the minstrels, and these were the court musicians. These were not church musicians. These were not connected with anybody, but with any religious institution. They were the nobles musicians. They were the ones who composed the music for the courts, and it was a very swanky job. It wasn't the jongler kind of hopping down the street singing his song for anybody who would pass. These were the noble composers, and so that is troubadour. That is the fancy tradition of monophonic singers. And then you also had the people who were singing songs, because we have a lot of work to do, or we have the pilgrims who are traveling on great voyages and need things to do to pass the time. And so the last thing that I'm going to be leaving you with today are 3 different collections of songs from the era, and these are my favorites. It's not that I'm biased or anything. The exciting thing about these is that where your music comes from and where your lyrics comes from is different for every version, and there are absolutely modern parallels that can be drawn from this. The first I want to start with is the Carmina Burana. No, not the Karl Orff one, the first one. Karl Orff took the words from these manuscripts, totally threw out all the melodies, wrote all of his own, and made all of that. But that's after 1399. We're not talking about that today. The original Carmina Burana, which was called the Benedictine manuscript, found in Benedictine, Bavaria, was compiled by the Goliards of the 12th through 14th century. The Goliards were these groups of scholars who didn't quite make it all the way through university. They were the frat boys, they were the dropouts, they were the stoners. They're the ones who are hanging out in the classes afterwards like, oh yeah, so that's what you learned today? I made a song about it. You're all learning your super fancy church music, right? I wrote new words to that. And they're filthy. And they're horrible, but there's some great drinking tunes out of it. And if you learn nothing else today, the Carmina Burana has lots of great drinking tunes, and that great drinking tunes that were taken from church texts, which is awesome. So I found this really cool analogy that I think of, the frat boys and the stoners as well. That's the one way to think of who they were. But they were also, when you think of the age of faith and the age of piousness, and you had these people in these universities where everything was Middle Ages and everything was very proper. They did not do that. They are to the age of faith as the beat poets were to nice and prim fancy proper 1950s America. They did not follow the norm at all. And the church did not like this very much. And so by 1300, they were told not to do that anymore. By way of suppression or defrocking or otherwise kicking them out, saying, enough of this. However, they wrote enough down that we have records of it, so no matter what, we can still perform them to this day. And I think that would bring them great joy to know that. On the other hand, swinging from sacred melodies with not nearly so sacred texts, we have the Livre Vermel de Montserrat, called the Red Book. And this is a collection of what we have now, what is left, 10 songs with musical notation, which is awesome. The Carmina Burana, it had a lot of words, and we figured based on looking at the words that, O Roman Splendissima, that's probably like O Virgin Splendissima, except they're talking about Rome and, drinking. As opposed to the Livre Vermel, which was written by the church. And why it was written by the church is one of my favorite stories. So, you had your pilgrims traveling on the roads, traveling hundreds of miles And what do you do when you're traveling? You sing songs to help ease the burden of the roads that you have to travel and the miles that you have to cross. And what are the songs that you are singing when you are exhausted and on the road and no one is there to supervise you? You probably sing ones that aren't very good for children. Well, the church didn't really like that, because in Montserrat, which was a famous pilgrimage site, people would go to it to see the abbey that was there and to see the relics that were held in Montserrat. There was no house for the pilgrims to stay in, so they had to stay in the church. And when they were singing these off-color songs in the church, that's when the church said, oh, no, we cannot have this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those melodies that you don't have to make, you don't have to learn anything crazy difficult, but sing these words instead. Because you're going to sing about Mary and Jesus and how death is coming, and unless you repent, you're going to burn in the fires of hell, and those things are so sad, but heaven is so great. So you'll sing about these things now, okay? Okay. And so we have records of fancy sacred music becoming very filthy, and filthy music becoming very sacred. So between these, we can figure out, like, oh, we can take whatever melody you want, you can take it and write whatever words you want for whatever purpose you want, because there are no rules. And so, this is, in period, this is called contrafact. When you do it with modern music, it's called filth. And if anybody ever gives you grief for it, you say it's period because Bird said so. Originally, the Liber Vermel contained like 172 double pages, but over time, Napoleon sacked all of it, and the library was almost destroyed. And so, from what we have left, in the Victorian times, they rebound it with a red velvet cover, and that's how we get the name, the Red Book of Montserrat, because of this modern addition to this very old text. Last collections of songs that I want to talk about are my personal favorite, the Cantigas de Santa Maria. This is a collection, a monstrous collection. It's one of the biggest collections of monophonic music that we have from this period. It's over 400 songs, the majority of them with notation. And this is so exciting because you have such a huge example and a huge variety of music that was performed. It's interesting that a lot of them are similar, and then you can look at the things that are different, and and get a better, more comprehensive idea of what was the music that was popular. Because these, like the Liber Vermel, were probably songs that people knew. Probably songs that people were singing. They're easy to sing along to. That's what they're meant to do. They're meant to be singing. They're the Cantigas de Santa Maria, songs for Santa Maria. They're all praises and descriptions of the great miracles in St. Mary's name. And every 10th one is a declaration of Santa Maria, you are so amazing, you are so wonderful. And the rest of them are, let me tell you about this thing that happened. And there are so many kinds of stories. They range from the beautiful, the monk who writes in 3 colors. There was a monk who was so devoted to the Virgin Mary that every time when he lifted his quill, when he wrote the Virgin Mary's name, he did it in argent and rose and gold, which I forget their girl's name. Gold. Or, yes. Yeah, we're across the Herald's tent. I shouldn't say that so loud. And so he held these pieces of paper that had the Virgin Mary's name. He held them close to his heart, and when he felt, he was so moved by the Spirit that in contemplation he would carry them and he would kiss the Virgin's name. And one day that monk fell very, very ill, and as he lay dying at his bedside, the Virgin Mary appeared to him and said, "You who have been so faithful to me and have written my name, your name is written in the book of heaven, for you always wrote my name in 3 colors." And with that, the Virgin took him to heaven, and a friar who saw all that had transpired brought the monks in and said, Santa Maria is a miracle! He's been brought to heaven. And on the other hand, who here doesn't know the pork chop cantiga? You don't know the pork chop cantiga? Yay! Good. Okay, I'm glad. Because if everybody knew it, I wasn't going to tell the story, but I'm going to tell the story. One day, 9 pilgrims were walking along the road, and growing weary at the end of the day, they came to an inn. They had 9 pork chops. They brought these pork chops to the innkeeper, saying, "You go and prepare these for our supper, for we must go off to the church to pray." And when they return, there is a problem. There is a pork chop missing. The blame is, it must be the servant girl who stole the pork chop from us. And so they cried out in desperation, Santa Maria, what are we going to do? They cried out, and suddenly, in the corner, there's a chest with a great knocking noise coming from it. And they open the chest, and there is the pork chop, dancing for joy, Santa Maria! They were so amazed by this miracle that they then took the pork chop and they brought it to the Church of St. Mary, for this truly is a sign that the Mother is with us. And they hung it up by a beautiful silken cord in the middle of July, up in the cathedral. And when you look at the manuscripts, you see the pork chop there, surrounded by garlands of flowers, because, oh God, it's Spain in July. Santa Maria! I have a whole list of some of my favorites. These are some that are performed often, like the pork chop cantiga. This Tuesday of War Week, there's a pilgrimage that goes all around Pennsic. That is one of the songs that we sing. So if you want to hear what it truly sounded like as we praise the Virgin, we will be walking all along the savannah at around 1 to 2 or so on Tuesday of War Week. We will be singing songs from the Cantigas de Santa Maria. We will be singing songs from the Liber Vermel de Montserrat. What's another really big one? Oh, so this is one that I have never heard performed before, but there is this awesome resource at the that I wrote on the back of your packet of 2 websites. One is the cantigasdesantamaria.com, and this has the original text and the IPA pronunciations, how to perform them, and the notation. The other website is the Oxford Cantiga database. And that one I really like because it has a vague translation of what's going on. It's not a word-for-word translation, but it's a pretty good idea of what's going on in the story. So between these 2, I was able to get a comprehensive idea of what's going on. And between these 2, my plan is that I will start creating translations, so that way, more translations, so that way we can have even more cantigas sung in a language that we understand. Because these are some pretty crazy stories. So one that I don't hear performed that I want to research on my, and research to see if I can bring this back to life. There's the king of Marrakesh, who's not a Christian, is at war with another king. He has Christians in his kingdom, and they go to him and say, "My king, if you carry the banner of the Virgin Mary and bring Christians carrying crosses, you will be victorious in this battle, for the Virgin takes care of those who honor her name." He says, "All right, I will try this." And so when he goes out to war, he has the men carrying the banners of the Virgin Mary. He has the men carrying crosses as they go, and they wipe the snot out of the other army. For the Virgin takes care of those who honor her, or as I like to think of it, Mary really likes her face on stuff. And what is my, how stands the hour? 11:59.
10 minutes.
Oh, that's so exciting. So